A young woman with no money, no family fortune, and no inheritance convinced some of the most financially sophisticated institutions in the world that she was sitting on $60 million, and she almost got away with it. She wore Balenciaga to her own fraud trial. She tipped lavishly with money she did not have. She walked into banks, private clubs, and five-star hotels with the kind of quiet confidence that made people feel lucky just to be in the room with her. And for 2 extraordinary years in the heart of Manhattan, that was enough. This is the story of Anna Delvey, and how a young woman from a Russian industrial town invented a European heiress from nothing and nearly bought herself a $22 million future. Welcome to Thread Court. Understand how this happened, you have to understand New York. Not the New York of subway delays and studio apartments, but the other New York. The one that exists behind velvet ropes and private dining rooms. The one where a single dinner reservation signals membership in an invisible hierarchy, where the right gallery opening puts your name in circulation, where reputation moves faster than money and sometimes substitutes for it entirely. It is a world built on introductions. On vouching, on the seamless, mutual performance of belonging, and it is a world that, by design, is almost impossible to enter from the outside. Anna Sorokin understood that world from the outside before she ever set foot in it. She was born in 1991 in Domodedovo, a working-class city about 25 miles south of Moscow known principally for its airport and its industrial estates. Her father drove trucks. The family was not wealthy, not well-connected, not positioned for any of the things that would later define the life Anna would claim as her own. When she was 16, the family relocated to a suburb of Cologne, Germany, and Anna enrolled in school there. Learning German, developing the cultivated neutrality of someone who had already lived in 2 different languages and found neither entirely satisfying. She was sharp, that much everyone who knew her agreed on, sharp, visually sophisticated, and relentlessly curious about fashion, art, and the architecture of status. She enrolled briefly at Central St. Martin's in London, one of the most prestigious art and design schools in the world, though she did not complete her studies there. She interned at Purple magazine in Paris, a French fashion publication with serious cultural cachet, and she absorbed. She watched. She learned exactly how the rooms she wanted to inhabit were furnished, not with objects but with behavior. Around 2013, she arrived in New York. She was 21 years old. She did not arrive as Anna Sorokin. She arrived gradually as Anna Delvey. The surname, precise, European, slightly aristocratic without being ostentatious, appeared first in social circles, then on credit applications, then in conversations with lawyers and bankers and city officials. Nobody knows exactly where the name came from. What they do know is what it signified. Delvey sounded like old money. It sounded like someone who had no need to explain herself. The persona was constructed with the patience and attention to detail of a method actor preparing for a career-defining role. Anna dressed in designer clothing, Stella McCartney, Balenciaga, Alexander Wang, and she wore it with the casual indifference of someone for whom those purchases were genuinely unremarkable. She was known for extraordinary tips, often 50% or more of a bill, handed over in cash or charged to one of a rotating series of cards. She spoke about her plans with the crisp authority of someone used to being listened to. She was blunt, even rude on occasion, and in that particular social ecosystem, abrasiveness reads as power. Nobody who is anxious about their position speaks dismissively to a waiter. Only people who have never had to worry about it do. She networked with the precision of someone running a campaign. Art world figures, finance professionals, interior designers, real estate attorneys. She moved between gallery openings, private dinners, and hotel lounges, collecting introductions the way other people collect business cards. Each new contact was a potential validator. Each validator made the next conversation easier. And at the center of everything, she had a vision. A real one, or at least a real-sounding one. She called it the Anna Delvey Foundation. The concept, as she pitched it, was a members-only private arts institution to be housed in a landmark Manhattan building. Not a gallery, not a club exactly. Something harder to categorize and therefore more interesting to the people she was pitching it to. It would include studio space for artists, a restaurant, a performance venue, curated residencies. It would sit at the intersection of art, finance, and exclusivity in a way that New York did not yet have. She showed architectural renderings. She referenced comparable institutions in Europe. She name-dropped the 281 Park Avenue South building in Manhattan as a potential location, a real building, a historically significant one, and she had conversations with the people who controlled it. The pitch was credible because the person delivering it was credible. Or rather, because the person delivering it had constructed credibility with extraordinary discipline over several years. And because the pitch was credible, the next step seemed reasonable to the people she was asking. She needed funding. She had, she explained, a $60 million inheritance held in a foreign fund, structured in a way that made it temporarily inaccessible for the purposes of a US-based real estate transaction. She needed a bridge loan. She needed $22 million. Let that number sit for a moment. $22 million. She walked into multiple financial institutions in New York City and asked for $22 million, backed by documents she had forged. The documents described an offshore account containing $60 million. They had the right logos, the right fonts, the right bureaucratic density. They were not, of course, real. But they looked real enough that Citibank, City National Bank, and Signature Bank all engaged with her seriously before ultimately declining the loan request after deeper scrutiny. Think about what that means. These were not small community banks. These were institutions with compliance departments, with due diligence teams, with legal counsel. And Ana Delvey sat across from their officers and made a credible enough case that they took meetings, reviewed documents, and ran analysis before deciding no. She never got the $22 million, but she got something else. Fortress Investment Group was a major alternative asset management firm based in New York. In late 2016, Ana presented herself to representatives there as a high-net-worth client seeking a loan in anticipation of completing a real estate transaction. She brought documentation. She answered questions with the composure of someone who had answered those kinds of questions many times before. The loan she was seeking was $100,000. Compared to the $22 million she had been chasing, $100,000 was a rounding error, and that, perhaps, is part of what made it work. The amount was large enough to be taken seriously, but small enough not to trigger the most rigorous level of institutional scrutiny. Fortress extended the loan. It was $100,000 she had no legitimate claim to, secured with financial documents she had fabricated. And she spent it. That is the detail that keeps coming up in every account of this case. She spent it, not on infrastructure for the foundation, not on anything that could later be dressed up as a business investment. She spent it on the life she had been constructing, on hotels, on clothes, on the expenses of being Ana Delvey in a city where being Ana Delvey cost a considerable amount of money every day. Because the hotels were not incidental to the scheme, they were structural. A home address in Manhattan, the kind that would appear on a loan application or a letter of introduction, required actually living in Manhattan. And Ana Delvey did not maintain a long-term lease. She lived in hotels. The W Hotel in Midtown, the Beekman in Lower Manhattan, the 11 Howard in Soho. These were not budget accommodations. Rooms at these properties ran several $100s a night, sometimes considerably more. She checked in with confidence, occupied suites for weeks at a time, ordered room service, entertained guests in the bar, and then, when it came time to settle the bill, produced payment methods that did not work. She wrote checks that bounced. She presented cards that declined. When confronted, she was never flustered. She was annoyed in the way that someone of her stated position would naturally be annoyed by a clerical inconvenience. There must be an issue with the transfer. She would have it sorted. Could they be patient for just another day? Sometimes they were, and sometimes that extra day was enough time for her to move to the next hotel and start the cycle again. Across a period of roughly 2 years, she accumulated tens of thousands of dollars in unpaid hotel bills at some of the most prestigious addresses in Manhattan. It is a testament to the completeness of the persona she had built that she was able to stay as long as she did. Hotel staff are trained to read guests. They see hundreds of people a week. They are not naive. But there is a particular kind of guest, the kind who knows the right names, orders the right things, wears the right clothes, and wears them correctly, who reads as unimpeachable. Ana Delvey had become that guest, and so the staff waited, and the bills grew. But it didn't stop there. In the summer of 2017, Ana invited a friend on a trip to Morocco. The friend, a young woman who worked in the media industry and who had known Ana through their overlapping social circles in New York, had reason to think of Ana as exactly what Ana appeared to be: wealthy, connected, generous in the way that only people with deep reserves of money can afford to be generous. The trip was pitched as a working retreat of sorts. Ana had business to attend to, and Morocco was the kind of destination where people like Ana conducted business. They flew to Marrakesh and checked into a luxury villa. The expenses were significant. Flights, accommodation, activities, all of it consistent with the lifestyle Anna had been projecting for years, and all of it charged when the time came to the friend's credit card. That part had a ready explanation. Anna's cards were having issues, temporary. She would transfer the money as soon as they were back in New York. The friend had enough trust in Anna and enough confidence in Anna's resources to accept this. The total charges on her card came to approximately $62,000. The transfer never came. What came instead was a prolonged, deteriorating exchange of messages in which Anna alternated between vague promises, irritable deflection, and extended silence. The friend, whose name has been partially protected in reporting on the case, eventually retained a lawyer. She became one of the most critical witnesses against Anna Sorokin at trial. The Morocco trip was not the largest fraud Anna committed, but it was the most personal. It involved someone who had extended not just credit but trust, the humankind, and Anna had spent both without remorse. What they didn't realize was that the whole structure was starting to show its cracks. Hotels have institutional memories. A guest who bounces a check and moves on might not be remembered at the front desk a month later, but the record exists. A pattern of declined payments across multiple properties in the same city, over a period of months, accumulates in ways that eventually surface. The W Hotel, where Anna had stayed multiple times and left significant unpaid balances, had staff who had been watching her payment behavior with increasing unease. At some point in mid-2017, someone made a call. The specifics of exactly who first contacted law enforcement are not entirely public, but what is documented is that the Manhattan District Attorney's Office opened an investigation that was thorough and methodical. Investigators began pulling bank records. They subpoenaed hotel documentation. They contacted former associates. They traced wire transfers, bounced checks, and declined card transactions across a 2-year window. And they began to construct a picture of a scheme that, while it lacked the billion-dollar scale of some financial fraud cases, was remarkable for the sheer personal audacity at its center. The documents Anna had used were examined carefully. The $60 million foreign account, the cornerstone of every pitch she had ever made, did not exist. The statements describing it had been fabricated with skill and attention to formatting, but forensic financial analysis left no ambiguity. There was no account. There was no heiress. There was no foundation, not in any legally or financially meaningful sense. By autumn of 2017, the investigation had progressed to the point where law enforcement knew who they were looking for and approximately where she was. Then came the moment that crystallized just how different Anna Sorokin was from most people who find themselves in her position. She was not hiding. She was not on the run. She was not in an anonymous motel somewhere trying to keep a low profile. She was at a wellness retreat and rehabilitation facility in Malibu, California, a comfortable one. She was arrested there in October 2017. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office filed charges. The case was built on bank records, hotel receipts, testimony from former associates, and documentary evidence that had been gathered over months of investigation. The charges included multiple counts of grand larceny, theft of services, and attempted grand larceny, the last category relating to the $22 million loan she had sought but never received. The arrest might have ended the story. In most cases, it does. The accused is arraigned, bail is set, the wheels of the criminal justice system begin their slow rotation, and the subject recedes into the legal process. Anna Sorokin did not recede. She was held on Rikers Island while awaiting trial, having been denied bail on the basis that she was considered a flight risk and had no verified ties to the United States. She was there for 18 months, and during that time, something unexpected happened. Her story got out. In late 2018, New York Magazine published a long-form piece by journalist Jessica Pressler under the headline, How Anna Delvey Tricked New York's Party People. Pressler had conducted extensive reporting, interviewing former associates, hotel staff, lawyers, and people who had been defrauded. The piece ran to thousands of words, and it landed, as the phrase goes, like a bomb. The story had everything that makes a narrative irresistible in the media landscape of 2018. A charismatic central figure, a setting that people both admired and resented, class anxiety dressed up as a crime story, and the deeply satisfying structure of a con finally exposed. It spread rapidly across social media. Think pieces proliferated. The question everyone was asking was not just how she had done it, but why New York had let her do it for so long. Anna Sorokin, sitting in Rikers Island, sold the rights to her story to New York Magazine for an advance reportedly around $300,000. And then she went to trial. Her 2019 trial in Manhattan drew the kind of media attention more commonly associated with celebrity criminal proceedings. Cameras were not permitted in the courtroom, but reporters filled the gallery. Fashion journalists wrote about her courtroom outfits with the same analytical register they would apply to a runway show. And those outfits were deliberate, every single one of them. Anna had used a portion of her New York magazine advance to hire a stylist. She appeared each day of her trial in a different carefully selected look, a tweed blazer here, a white ruffle blouse there, pieces from Alexander Wang and Clyde, and other labels that her presumed audience would recognize. The message was not subtle, but it was sophisticated. She was the same Anna Delvey she had always been. Whatever the court decided, she would not appear diminished. She would not dress like a defendant. She would dress like herself, which was to say, like someone who belonged in a different kind of room than the one she was currently in. Prosecutors were not moved. The state's case was built on specificity, not the sweeping architecture of the fraud, the $60 million, the imaginary foundation, but on the granular, documented particulars. The exact amounts on the checks that bounced, the dates on which she checked in and checked out of hotels without paying, the wire transfers that were initiated but never completed, the fortress loan, the Morocco trip, the paper trail of a person who had spent years spending money she had taken from other people.